All right, now we've started the recording. Welcome, everyone. This is the Federation of Friends meeting for this spring. We're happy that we can all be together virtually this time of year to share some updates with you, some things that are happening around the Park Authority, and to hear from you all as well about successes and challenges and things that you want to share with the group. We are ever so always thankful for your partnerships, and we're excited to share some information with you. So I will kick it right off, and the first topic we're going to hear from is our planning and development team talking about our parks, recreation, open space, and access process strategy, and presenting will be Stephanie Cornejo and Sam Hudson.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Stephanie Cornejo, and I'm delighted to provide an update on the Parks, Recreation, Open Space, and Access Strategy, also known as PROSA. We'll go over the project objectives, the main elements of PROSA, the project schedule, and our next steps moving forward. The PROSA strategy will provide a framework for equitable access to FCPA parks, and it will provide a roadmap for improved park access and a balance of recreational experiences to meet the diverse needs of Fairfax County residents. We're spearheading PROSA because of the Parks and Recreation System Master Plan goals and the Park Authority strategic plans, objectives, and policies. More specifically, the strategic plan outlines an action step to develop and implement an approach to county park planning and capital projects that considers resource protection, service level delivery, equity, recreation, and community needs. PROSA will also support FCPA's CAPRA reaccreditation this year. The PROSA strategy will provide a path for improved park access and provide a balance of recreational experiences. To get there, we will identify gaps in 10-minute walk access to parks. We'll take into account complete parks by determining the types of recreation categories and experiences, such as active recreation, contemplative passive experiences, and social gatherings, and define which facility generally falls into these experiences. We'll also examine habitat connectivity, and then we'll take all the data and look at it through an equity lens. That is to say, factoring in equity using demographics and socioeconomic data to help analyze and prioritize needs and projects. The PROSA strategy will guide our capital improvement program when we prioritize needs and projects. And diving into each of these elements, let's look at the 10-minute walk analysis. For the 10-minute walk analysis, our goal is to identify which households can and cannot access an FCPA park within a 10-minute walk from their home. The 10-minute walk to a park is a national industry standard for serving residents. Our analysis looks at access to park entrances. It's not as the crow flies, so a straight shot. It's based on where you can get into the park. We'll also identify geographic priority areas to improve walk access to FCPA parks and identify opportunities to increase the 10-minute walk through existing and future parkland or trails. As we dive into complete park experiences, we know PROSA is a strategy to create an equitable park system where residents can access a variety of park experiences. And to do so, we're looking at complete park experiences, which consists of active recreation, passive contemplative experiences, social gathering opportunities, and natural cultural recreation. And for this component of PROSA, we are going to identify which areas do not have access to these primary experience categories within a 10-minute walk or a 5-minute drive from their home. We'll also evaluate parks based on a park score to understand the balance of these experiences at park sites. We'll also look at habitat connectivity and identify opportunities to improve habitat health at existing parks and identify whether there are opportunities to expand habitat connectivity through existing parkland or potential future parkland acquisitions. And most importantly, as we look at the next component for our equity analysis, we will use an equity lens to analyze and prioritize projects. We'll utilize Fairfax County's One Fairfax as a foundation using One Fairfax's tools and data, and we'll build from the county's vulnerability index as a foundation for our analysis and findings. And to put this into perspective, as we go to the next slide, thank you. Our needs assessment tells us what we need, and PROSA is going to tell us where we need it. These PROSA recommendations will inform our capital improvements, and this work will inform our 2026 bond list. And let's look at an example. We're going to walk through just an example of how PROSA in action. So if we have about 10.5 million for acquisitions in the 6-year bond cycle, it's important to note the average cost per acre in Fairfax County is a little less than $1 million, and we would need at least 10 acres to create a new local park. So the 10.5 million gets us one park. And again, this slide is looking at PROSA in action, looking at the Annandale Planning District. So the map on the right-hand side, if you look at it, the darker green colors are parks. The lighter green color around our parks represents the 10-minute walk shed. And the darker red colors that you're seeing on the center-ish part of the map shows our densest areas. And the purple stripes hatched area are equity areas. They're areas where you don't see green, and this is where there isn't a 10-minute walk to a park. And as we go to the next slide, we'll zoom in a little bit more so you can see part of the district a bit more. And as you can see in the area directly below the Manassas Gap Railroad Park, it's a very high dense area. And again, that's those darker red shades. And it's also an equity area, which again, you can see through the hatched purple stripes. And there's a gap in the 10-minute walk to parks. And PROSA will help us focus acquisition funding to places where we don't have access to a park and areas with greater density and in equity areas. So looking ahead at the project schedule, we're anticipated to complete PROSA in summer of this year. As you can see, there are 6 primary project phases, and we're currently straddling 2 of those phases. We're on the report development side of phase 3, and we're gearing up for phase 4, which entails another round of public engagement that focuses on receiving public feedback on key draft excerpts of the PROSA strategy. In terms of our next steps, we'll continue with our planning analysis and developing the report. We're currently hosting focus groups based on demographics. We'll be gearing up for that launch of phase 2 that we just talked about, of public engagement in the springtime. And then we'll also provide updates to the Park Authority Board on the core components recommendations of PROSA in the spring and present the final report in the summer. So with that, I want to say thank you so much for your time and attention. I really appreciate it and hope you have a good evening. Thank you.
Thank you, Stephanie. Very exciting. And next we have the FY24 proposed budget and CIP adjustments.
I think that's me. My name is Jay Cole. I'm the Executive Director of the Park Authority. I'll start off with my introductions. This is a presentation, is an amalgamation of a couple of presentations that we've been giving recently, most recently at the CIP Planning Commission meeting on the CIP. So we're going to quickly go through CIP. We're going to go through our budget requests. The way that this works is that we submit our proposed budget and our proposed CIP to the county. Ultimately, it will be up to the Park Authority Board to determine what's in and out, but we had to utilize some data-driven analysis to come up with our proposal. So when you're watching this, just keep in mind that what's in and out is not determined yet. That will be through a public process and ultimately culminating in our board voting. So next slide. Okay, keep going. All right, where am I going with this? I will tell you where I'm going with this. My staff were all very wary of my stars and planets, but in a normal CIP world, and the best way to look at parks as CIP, in a normal CIP with a lot of public safety, libraries, it's all big planets. So when we're talking about a project, it's like, oh, we need to cut 30 million. We're going to cut this one big project. So we have, public safety building or a police station or a community center, or a shelter, or, a human shelter or an animal shelter. Next slide. So parks is like that as well. We're very much like schools. We have the big planets. We have the Mount Vernons, and we have the Audrey Moore Rec Center, and we have the Franconia. But we also have, next slide, all the stars, right? The stars are 252 athletic courts and 5 nature centers and 334 miles of trail, 8 golf courses, 34 historic sites, 103 turf fields. We have 228 playgrounds and 62 picnic shelters. So we have the stars and we have the big planets, and we have to fit it all in to work. And next slide. And when we look at all the stars, it doesn't fit if we don't have everything together. So we put it all together. Next slide. And we form a constellation, right? So this is which one is this? This is which
Orion.
Thank you.
Orion. It's Orion.
Thank you. I'm landing the plane. So this is Orion, right? And you can't form Orion unless we need the major rec centers, but we also need acquisitions, and we need new park projects. We need all of these things to create our constellation. We can't just focus on one thing. We have to figure out how all of the stars plus all of the planets form, our constellation. So we're much like schools. Schools have playgrounds, and schools have sidewalks and parking lots, and they also have the large school renovations. Next slide. So what are some of those stars and planets look like? We do things like Mount Vernon Woods redevelopment. That's a whole park project that we're creating for the community. About $2.5 million for a new park. They range from about 2.5 to 3.5, depending on if there's anything there currently. Next slide. We also do things like Burke Lake Marina improvements, where we had to stabilize the beach and add structures to prevent erosion and add drainage. And the things like Burke Lake, you wouldn't think that a project like this is about $1.5 million, but we need to stabilize it to allow for people to be able to enjoy that lakefront park. Next slide. We have our big, huge mega projects like Mount Vernon Rec Center, which is about $70 million. That's a completely new facility. We're adding a new sheet of ice. That facility is one of our oldest facilities. I believe it was built in 77 or 78. Old. So that's one of our mega projects. Next slide. And then we have a mega project in a smaller scale. We have things like Sully Woodlands Education Center, which is still to be finally named. That's for you, Jennifer. But that's going to be a new facility constructed to provide STEM education. We're so excited about this facility. It's going to be 100% carbon neutral, and will be both a model of integration with the natural surroundings and a center to study the same. Next slide. Okay, so you just heard about PROSA. Stephanie hit the nail on the head when we're talking about where we do projects. Our needs assessment tells us how many pickleball courts we need, how many fields we need, how many playgrounds we need. PROSA is going to tell us where we need them. It's going to allow us through a data-driven exercise to be able to hone in and make sure that we are getting the most bang for our buck and serving the most people, and making sure that we're not leaving communities that are in need to the wayside. Next slide. We can just skip this one because we just did these. Okay, so we also, when we're trying to build new, and everybody loves to cut a ribbon, I love to cut a ribbon and see a brand new facility. We can't forget that we also we're an old park system, and we have assets that are at the end of life or in need of repair. And this is the taking care of what you have, which is the bulk of our CIP. In a normal CIP, we made promises to the community, for a trail or a playground. And when that reaches the end of life, we need to replace it. We also have to really prioritize our user safety, and our patron safety is our utmost importance. And you think of a pothole or a trail that's crumbling on the side. I mean, that's, people get hurt utilized. We want to make sure that all of our patrons who are utilizing our facilities are utilizing state-of-the-art, up-to-date facilities. So this is just a snapshot of our list of assets that are at the end of the life or in need of repair. Next. So these are some examples for repairs and renovations. We have, redoing tennis courts and some converting to pickleball. On the bottom left is Martin Luther King Jr. pool, which is a project that I'm very proud of. It's our only free pool. It's in a area of opportunity, and the bathroom just wasn't up to our standards. That's the picture on the left. And we went in and we renovated the bathroom. The top is an example of a road project or an entryway to a park project. And the bottom is a good example of when, trails need a little bit of love and need to be redone. So that's a huge bulk of our CIP. So next slide. So now I'm gonna start to build our CIP up. So starting off with repairs and renovations, all of those things that we were talking about. On the bottom is some other examples of systems in a rec center, playgrounds. The bottom right is irrigation system, things like new bridges over streams. And that's about $10 million a year. We spend about $10 million a year just replacing, renovating things that we already have. So we take that $10 million a year, and that's $60 million in our CIP. Next slide. Then we add land acquisition. And for all of these numbers, we're literally just taking what we have for the 2020 bond, extrapolating that out from 4 years to 6 years. So that gets what Stephanie was talking about a 10.5 million adding for land acquisition. Next slide. We can skip that. Sherry, talk about that. Keep going. Yep. Adding new parks and facilities. As I said before, a new park is about 3 million. We average it out to be about 3 million. So this is adding in adding new parks. So when PROSA tells us that we need to, people don't have access to park facilities. Okay, well, how much does it cost to build the park? And so 6 projects at about $18 million. And then a little bit for minor new construction. Next slide. I think I showed minor new construction. No, that's it. No, sorry, go back. So minor new construction, some examples on the right side here are picnic shelters. I can't move my thing. Lake Fairfax is going to get an inline skate park. McDonald Field is getting a concessions and a restroom facility. That's those minor new construction. We're adding something new into an existing park. Next slide. And then here's some examples of new park projects. These are ones that we're working on right now. Ruxtall Park, about 2.5 million. Hogue Park, opening very soon at 2.2 million. I already talked about Mount Vernon Woods Park. Next slide. Okay, now let's add on natural and cultural resources. These include a lot of natural capital. So reforestation projects, wetland creation projects. This is a picture of some firework to control non-native invasive weeds and to promote meadows for natural succession. Archaeology programs, a lot of our resident curatorship programs, and stabilization of historic structures. Next slide. And here's some other examples. There's Elk Lick Preserve Reforestation Project. There's archaeology team mapping historic cemeteries. Next slide. Okay, so I talked a little bit about major projects. Here are 2 examples of major projects we talked about before. Patriot Park North is an enormous project that's opening very soon. We're very proud of that. And then Mount Vernon Rec Center, which we already talked about. Okay, so now we've filled the bucket. We've filled the bag with our CIP, and that's just our 4 years extrapolated out to 6 years. That gets us about $99.5 million, about $100 million. Now let's start putting in some of the big rocks. And these are some major projects that we've just been in discussion. These are not an exhaustive list of any major projects. This is just some examples of major projects that would be considered. So next slide. So the first rock we would suggest putting in would be Audrey Moore Rec Center. Audrey Moore is, I believe, our oldest rec center. There was a time when you had to pick between the 2. We had to split the 2 babies.
150 million?
We had to split the 2 babies of which one are we going to do, Audrey Moore or Mount Vernon. And Mount Vernon was chosen first, but Audrey Moore is just as in need. So next slide. So we put Audrey Moore in and we're up to 159.5 million. Next slide. Okay, so there's 2 projects that are also in that sort of group of 6. There were 6 rec centers that the county did made an extremely good investment in recreation. In 6 years, we created 6 rec centers: Mount Vernon, Audrey Moore, Providence, Franconia, rec center, 5 rec center, and George Washington. So the other two of my, I lovingly call my ugly ducklings, are Providence and Franconia Rec Center. Those will take about a $25 million renovation each. So adding in 50 million. That next. And that's how we got to our proposed CIP for the 6 year of 209.5 million. That was what we've created our proposed to the county. Next slide. So this is a summary of how that breaks down. Next slide. And again, I just want to reiterate that to get that number, we had $100 million baseline for the 2020 bond. We transitioned that $100 million from 4 to 6 years. That baseline would equal 150, but then we added in large projects, Audumore, Franconia, and Providence. And for those of you who don't know, haven't followed the hot topics in parks, Lee Rec Center and District Park have been renamed to Franconia Rec Center and Franconia District Park. Next slide. So this county executive came out and proposed the amount of 180 million for our 2026 bond. I will refer you back to that number. That was 150 would be our $100 million extrapolated out to 6 years. So 180 million is $30 million over our baseline from last year. So what we're dealing with right now, again, it was a very ambitious decision to build 5 rec centers in 6 years. But what it's ended up being is we have 5 rec centers that have well past their end of life. So trying to figure out how to be creative to make sure that we're getting to these rec centers in time and providing the same level of service across the county. Next slide. So when we talk about reducing our CIP by 29.5 million, it's going to be hard decisions that our board's going to have to make, right? Do we pick the large rocks like Franconia or Providence? Those are the easy ones to come out, but again, these are some rec centers that might not be able to make it. Or the same number, $30 million is 100 playgrounds, right? It's 20 synthetic fields, it's 30 picnic shelters, it's 30 miles of trail. And so those are those big planets and the small stars of trying to come up with, how to our decision-making process for the 2026 bond and the 2026 referendum. Next slide. Oh, here it is. The original rec center dates for our rec center issue. Mount Vernon was 79, Audumore 77, George Washington in 80, Franconia in 80, and Providence in 1982. Next slide. And just to show sort of why our rec center issue is at the forefront of our mind, these are some of examples of some of our phenomenal facilities: Cub Run, South Run, Spring Hill, and Oakmar. Next slide. And these are the facilities that we were talking about. Audumore, Providence, Mount Vernon, George Washington, and Franconia were all built in the late 70s. And there's just not that equal level of service. People are not getting the same rec center experience when you go to these rec centers as you do going to some of our more newly renovated facilities. Next slide. Okay, and I think that I turn it over to Mike.
Yes, that's
and
correct.
Before we get to Mike, this is Tim. May I just add about another 30 seconds or a minute quickly under Jay's presentation, which I thought was terrific. So CIP is the capital improvement project, and our portion of the county's overall capital improvement budget is the county has to set an overall budget, which is part of the advertised budget the county executive released in late February. So not only do our bond funds go into that, but also our spending rate goes into that. And I suspect that Mike might touch on that briefly. But one of the other reasons that the county has said that they're moved us from a 4-year bond cycle to a 6-year bond cycle is to put us on the same bond schedule as all the other county departments, agencies, and authorities, except for the school system. To provide more uniformity. But still, the bottom line is we've asked for $209 plus million for the reasons that Jay mentioned. And the county, in the advertised budget at least, has proposed for our next 6-year cycle 2026 Park Authority bond, a $180 million figure. So there's a significant gap there. So thank you.
Yes, thank you very much, Tim. It's a pleasure to talk to everyone again tonight. My name is Michael Peter, and I'm the Administration Division Director. So as Jay was just talking through the capital improvement program, we were seeing how the 4 to 6 year cycle transitions, and then the $180 million versus what we had put together there. We want to look at the flip side of this as well, and give a quick summary of what is in the county executive's proposed operating budget for the Park Authority as well. Now, keeping in mind that we have our general fund, which is the tax appropriation through the Board of Supervisors, and we have our revenue fund, and then our other maintenance and capital funds as well. So we'll specifically right here talk about the general fund. Next slide, please. So just to give you a sense here of what our budget looks like this year, FY23, it's about $30.7 million in terms of our general fund appropriation. And remember, that covers everything from most of our administration to a good portion of resource management, the non-revenue parts, as well as the different things across our system, like our trails, those restrooms, different things like that that Jay just talked about. So that became the baseline for the FY 2024 budget before we had anything that was added there by the county executive. So we went from that $30.7 million to an advertised budget of $33.1 million. It was a difference of $2.4 million. And what we'll be doing here is talking a little bit about what the requests are that were endorsed by the Park Authority Board, that we went through that process where so many of you had provided input as well. And of course, we listened very carefully to that input and incorporated that into what our requests were. But you'll also see that there are some things that were added here. For instance, salary increases for merit increases, as well as our cost of living increases, and then some other things that have been included in the baseline. So going into the first item that we had, this is my specialty to talk a little bit about this. Prices keep going up. We just heard all of the news today about how inflation has slowed down a bit. We haven't seen that slowing yet on our operating side. We haven't seen that yet on our construction side as well. So we did request in our basic contracts to run things an increase of up to $275,000. And the county executive has proposed partial funding for that to get us a little bit ahead of the game with $65,000. So that's the difference between what we requested and what's in that baseline budget. Amy, you have the next item?
Yes. Good evening, everyone. I'm Amy Vosper, one of the deputy directors with the Park Authority. As you all know, we have a robust summer concert series. It's provided free to the public, and currently nearly 1/2 of the cost of each show is for professional sound equipment and lighting. And we were able to ask for an additional $50,000 for those costs, the technical support that's been steadily arising. This additional funding will allow the Park Authority to cover increased contract costs, longer shows, and a more complicated technical support necessary for each show. So, good news.
And I think I have the next slide. Sarah Baldwin, Deputy Director over Operations and Administration for the Park Authority. Good evening, everyone. So the next item is related to maintenance funding for newly acquired property. And we acquire property, you all know, through fee simple acquisition, donations, proffers. And so the list on the right is the newly acquired property for FY22 and FY23. And we requested maintenance funding in order for us to maintain those facilities and new parks, and that was not funded. The impact of this not being funded puts further stress on our maintenance operations. As you all know very well, those operations are already stretched very thin. And so by not funding additional acquisitions, those operations are stretched even further. Next slide, please.
And I
This
believe
is-
this is mine. So actually, the Park Authority has been doing some work with bamboo long before the ordinance went into effect in January. But as you know, we have a new code, new ordinance that we have to abide by, passed March 2022, began in January this year. And funding is necessary to proactively mitigate that bamboo across the county on parkland. So we estimate that there's currently about 200 acres of running bamboo on FCPA property. And we do receive complaints, as you know. We propose the creation of a bamboo management program to address this currently unfunded mandate for a full-time basis. We asked for $552,642. It's not currently funded, but we are still in some discussions across the street with others as to how we can really target this particular issue. Next slide, please.
Jay, this is you. Yeah.
Oh, it's me. Okay.
Yeah.
So zero waste, trash and recycling. I just wanted to say we are in good talks across the street for bamboo. Third quarter, I think, is where we're gonna tackle that. So I don't want to leave you with the impression that it's not funded, although we have to make sure it gets in. So zero waste, trash and recycling. There's a zero waste ordinance for recycling and trash. This is to adhere to that, to make sure the largest landowner in the county is having trash and recycling bins. Currently, if you go to a lot of our parks, we have large dumpsters in front of our parks where our maintenance crews will empty trash cans and put them into the dumpsters. What that ends up being is a dumpster for the neighborhood sometimes. And so it really goes against the county's zero waste mandate, because we end up getting trash and recyclables that really should be in personal trash cans and accounted for in that way. So this would add emptying and hauling services that can't be handled by our current resources. You heard Sarah talking about maintenance and operations. We're pretty thin there in general. Adding additional trash and recycling service in our parks on the weekends to make sure that we have people out there emptying the trash cans to make sure that they don't overturn in the wind and end up in our streams and our forests. In the current model, right now, maintenance staff spend 2 to 3 days a week on trash, which really impacts their ability to focus on other park maintenance projects. We do understand that trash is important. We think that we need a dedicated crew. So, and also adding the recycling and ensuring that our trash and recycling separation is occurring at our parks and transported according to associated standards. And that was not funded. Next slide.
So as we've been talking about the PROSA planning and how that will be guiding our upcoming capital planning cycles, we also have a backbone area here that we've been working on for quite a while called asset management. We are in the beginning stages of implementing a new system that will combine all of our work orders, all of our assets into one system. And this will allow us to track our life cycle costs, our total cost of ownership, be able to track what the impact on specific assets are if we replace different parts of it. We asked for some additional assistance to be able to move forward with purchasing more licenses, which will escalate over the next 3 years, as well as some dedicated technical staff and training staff to help us with this internally. This was not funded. And we will continue discussing this as we move forward with full implementation. Next slide, please, Allison. And on the flip side of this, as we say right here, with more than 2,500 employees at the peak of our summertime activities, we have a lot of technical needs throughout the system. And we also have an increasingly mobile workforce, which requires assistance. And we have a very small IT services support team. So we are continuing to ask for additional help to be able to peak up when we have 2,500 employees, and then also provide more dedicated service and development services internally. This was not funded in this budget either. Next slide, please.
So we made an equity ask in addition to the equity ask from last year of a down payment on equity while staffers continuing to work with our consultants on our long-term equity plan. So in working across the street with the county, we got partially funded for our equity ask in order to hold our summer camps, our 2023 summer camp fees at 2022 levels. The pressure on a revenue fund is, I don't know if the word steep or harsh. And so trying to somewhat stop increasing fees, especially for things like camps were important. We are having additional investments and additional programs are being discussed across I call it across the street with the county for our equity investments. But this particular ask is partially funded at $500,000. Next slide.
Okay, this is Amy Vosper once again. Not long ago, representatives from a local museum approached us, the Park Authority, with an offer to donate the museum and its grounds to the Park Authority. They asked that we make sure that we have operating funds to manage the site in the way they believe that should be managed. And we ask in this budget cycle for over $400,000 for that operation and management of the asset. It was partially funded at $200,000, and we believe we can work with that as we continue discussions moving forward.
So Sarah again, the next request was related to a park ranger program. If you have visited parks in any of the local jurisdictions, Loudoun, Prince William, Arlington, most of those jurisdictions all have a park ranger program. And I know many of you spend a lot of time in our parks and you see some of the challenges our staff deal with graffiti, destruction of property, unauthorized use, trespassing, encroachments, thefts with thefts from vehicles, dog bites, drug and alcohol use. And really what we're trying to do is implement a pilot program modeled off what other local jurisdictions are doing, where they have a presence of park rangers that are active within the parks, educating the community on park rules and regulations. We've been challenged over the last couple of years, especially with an increase in incidents that are occurring within parks. And unfortunately, the police department is struggling as well with staffing and are not able to provide the overtime support that they have in the past. So the pilot program would reduce that burden on the police department and ensure that we're protecting our resources by having an active presence by the park rangers, educating the community on our rules and regulations. And this was not funded. Jay, I think this is
Jay,
you.
this is you. Yeah.
Okay, so activation staff, this is under our equity umbrella as well. We just talked about PROSA plan, which is telling us what our needs are in specific areas of the county. You know, the long game is to purchase land and be able to develop it. But in the short term, we need ways that we can bring parks out into our communities. And the activation staff is one of those requests. It's to activate our parks in ways that the community and the neighborhood would like it to be activated. We think that every time anybody has an event or anything, it should be in our parks. Our parks are the gathering places for the community. So this was for activation staff to work with communities to activate local parks with events that reflect the communities that the local parks are in, creating a sense of place and belonging. So that request was not funded. Next slide. Is this me too? Okay. I'll do it. Forestry funding. So our current contract budget of $276,000 is really only covering about 40% of the annual cost of removing high-risk trees. There's a lot of reasons for it, but we're seeing a enormous increase in the amount of hazard trees that we're reporting right now. An average number of trees removed has increased by 143% compared to 10 years ago. These cost overruns are really taken from other high priority maintenance projects. Without the additional funds, we have to scale back to only the super highest of the high risk trees to remove. And right now we're really just triaging and taking down, and haven't gotten to the point where we can actually start to look at trees and identify and try to fix ailing trees and make sure that they're not falling down. Right now we're really just triaging and taking trees down. So this is to try to get back in line. I mean, I think that we are $750 to $1 million over that number this year alone. And so we really have to figure out how we're going to take care of our forestry needs. It's another subject that we're talking across the street on how to fix and how to bridge the gap. But it's a significant issue. So this request was to add 3 merit full-time equivalents to start being a little bit more proactive in our urban forestry planning and the vehicles, and to add some contract money. Again, that was partially funded, but we are in talks across the street to figure out how to utilize other methods to get some of this funded. Next slide.
So a theme throughout our presentation has been on maintenance, and critical to our maintenance operations, aside from staff, is having equipment to maintain our parks and facilities. The Park Authority has about 400 pieces of capital equipment valued at over $7 million. And that half of that equipment is beyond its useful life and beyond its life expectancy. So we requested about $370,000 to be able to reinvest in capital equipment that's critical for us to maintain our parks. That was not funded. In previous years, we have received funding at carryover for capital equipment, but it was not included as baseline funding within the 24 budget this year.
It's me again, in the same category of trying to get our programs and facilities out into communities. A lot of our nature centers are phenomenal, but everybody doesn't have access to our nature centers. This was a budget request to create mobile nature centers, 2 specialized vehicles to assist with community engagement. So hand in hand with the activation is, let's activate our parks, let's add activities, let's bring in the mobile nature center, let's make sure that all of the communities in Fairfax County get to experience the same things. And so this was for 2 staff, preferably bilingual, to go into community to promote stewardship opportunities and build interest and rapport with the community. This request was not funded. This request was for staff. We were planning on trying to get the vehicles sponsored. Next slide. And then interpretation and translation services, again, under the same categories. It is a way to improve communication with all of our community members, regardless of what your primary languages, enhance our outreach efforts and ensure more equitable access to community meetings. That was $50,000 and that was not funded.
I think this is the last item, which was funding for replacement of synthetic turf fields. The Park Authority is the custodian of the replacement funds, both for school and county park fields. And next year, starting in FY24, we will run in a deficit with the amount of fields that need to be replaced and the funding that's available. And as the years go on, that deficit increases. So we are requesting funding so that we can replace the synthetic turf fields on schedule. If they're not replaced, they start to fail GMAX testing, which impacts the safety of the fields. And in some cases, we will be forced to close fields if we're not able to replace them on the cycle. And if we're not able to get them up to the GMAX test rating that's required by ASTM.
I believe we're turning over to Kyle.
Hi, this is me. Good evening, everybody. I'm Kyle Stone. I'm the current chair of the Park Authority Board. Thank you all for coming. Thank you for your support and advocacy for the park system. And before I get in and do a little spiel, want to recognize we have three of my colleagues on the call with us tonight: Tim Hackman, Ken Quincy, and Ron Kendall. Thank you guys for joining as well. So, I mean, as park staff just kind of went through, there were 12 or so, somewhere in that ballpark, different kinds of requests that we proposed to the county executive through the budget submission process in the fall, most of which were not funded at all or were funded minimally. So that sets us up in a position this kind of spring, basically now through adoption in the middle of April, to have conversations with our board, to advocate, to have conversations with the board of supervisors, to advocate before them, to see what we can turn around. And I think we had some pretty good success with that last year. We didn't get all of what we asked for, but thanks to many of you for coming out during the budget public hearing process and talking to your supervisors, we were able to get some pretty significant wins in that regard. And so for this year, obviously, feel free to promote and talk to your board member or your supervisors with any of the items we brought up, but there's a couple we want to kind of maybe put a little extra emphasis on, pay a little bit more attention to. We have some good news, as was mentioned by a couple of different staff folks this evening, that both bamboo removal and forestry operations look like we're going to get some amount of funding that falls out of third quarter. For anybody who doesn't know, third quarter is kind of an amendment to the current fiscal year. So sometimes, I don't understand how, but that's neither here nor there, money kind of falls out. We end up with extra money. The county ends up with some extra funds it wasn't banking on, and they're able to support one-time kind of needs, which is great for us right now. It helps in the immediate term with bamboo and with forestry, but over the, it doesn't change the position we're ultimately in, because unless these kinds of things get added to the baseline budget, which is what we requested, we're right back and asking for these things again next year. So we're hoping, and we've got some good positive signs on both of those for third quarter, that most of those requests will be met, which is, again, great in the short term, but those issues are by no means will be solved with that. The zero waste trash removal in particular is one that we would perhaps encourage you all in your conversations with supervisors. Lady, I saw your note. Yes, that's correct, but there's also opportunities to just increase contract spending on forestry. So it's not necessarily just positions. Sorry, Lydia had a question about how one-time funding could be spent, and I just saw it as I was talking. So anyway, zero waste trash would be a great one for people to emphasize this spring, because not only does it help with that issue in particular, but it relieves pressure on other maintenance. So because right now, as we go and try to enforce the ordinance that the county has implemented, that is competing with other maintenance needs. So if we're able to get any bit of that funded, not only are we able to help and actually meet that ordinance and get trash out of our parks, which is a good thing generally, it allows us to then fund other maintenance needs. I think I'm done blabbering on this slide. So let's go to the next one. And then again, just want to emphasize a couple things on the equity side this time. In particular, I think the mobile nature centers and park ranger pilot program will be great things if we could see happen. And again, if these are things you could talk to your board supervisor about, whether in one-on-one meetings and emails to them or during the testimony, that would be fantastic. Next slide. All right, and this is just an overview of the budget timeline. We're in the middle of March right now, March 14th. We're at the beginning stage, maybe even the middle stage, I guess, of the public advocacy outreach process. Myself and 4 of my colleagues will be testifying before the board in April. I know many of us on the board, the park board, will be talking to our representative board of supervisor member, having one-on-one conversations with them, doing our best to advocate for the needs of the system. But what really helps move the needle is when they hear from you all and anyone else in the community. So, you know, talk to your friends, talk to your neighbors. You all get 1 or 2 more people to talk to the board, and they'll really start hearing from us. And that's when things can start to turn. And I think I'm done. Thank you guys again for being here this evening and for your support.
Am I doing this part? Okay, this is why somebody has to manage me, because I never know what my jobs are. So we wanted to give you guys a really quick, we talked about the study. We're in the middle of it, but we just wanted to, you hear a lot about till the equity study is done. So we just wanted to give you a little bit of update on where we are with that right now. So next slide. So this is sort of the scope of the HRNA analysis. HRNA is the company, the consultant firm that we have contracted out to do this work. So they're supporting us in our effort to make programs, services, facilities, and operational areas affordable and accessible to all Fairfax County residents, regardless of race or income. And this is the initial scope phase. So that's kind of where we are right now, and looking at project initiation, affordability, and accessibility, benchmarking, and best practices and implementation strategy. Next slide. So really, we're looking at multifaceted solution. It's a very big thing that we're looking at and trying to tackle. Again, I want to reiterate, like, this is not a problem that was created by, you know, current anything. It was created in the 60s and 70s. And so it's sort of snowballed into a very large equity issue. As you can see from our budget requests, this is not, the revenue fund is not our only way that we're tackling equity. There's a multifaceted solution. I say this with no favoritism when I say that FCPA is really leading the way in terms of, you know, putting equity to practice in the county. And I can say that because it started well before I started here. This has been a very big focus for this agency that I'm very, very proud of. So again, it's a multifaceted solution. It includes things like mobile nature centers. It includes things like, you know, community outreach. It includes things like fixing the revenue fund so our programs are affordable to everyone. It includes everything, and we're very well aware of that. But in the crux of it is what really should the revenue fund, you know, be supporting, and how do we determine how much county dollars or not should be included in our programming. Right now, we're heavily 100% fee-based. And that 100% fee base includes everything from the toilet paper to the light bulbs to our business analysts to our graphic designers. And what that does is it causes our costs to go up, and it makes it our programs, which are wonderful and I want everybody to be able to experience, not affordable to all of our residents. Next slide. Okay, so just to give you an example of sort of our revenue funds, because those of you who might have attended our revenue fee schedule where we had to increase some of our revenue fund fees. I just want to sort of explain a little bit about how our revenue fund works. And when I tell you that nobody on our staff likes to increase fees just because we like to increase fees, our revenue fund is a separate entity. And I believe I said it last year, I like to say that I run a private rec company and a public park system. And so the revenue fund, that roughly $50 million is self-sustaining, which means there is no safety net. We have to recoup all of our fees, all of our costs through fees. And so just as an example here as to why we have to, in the current model, increase fees every year, and why to not increase fees takes an injection of money from the county like we did for camps. This is just an example of employee pay increases. And we are so excited that our employees are getting more money. We would like to double that number and give people more than that. But the reality is, in our revenue fund, a 2% market rate adjustment is about $958,000. And that impacts our revenue fund. Adding to that, we have to be competitive in our salaries because, everybody's looking for part-time work now. It's really hard out there right now to get part-time staff, lifeguards, camp counselors, everything else. So we had to have a competitive salary increases and add some bonuses in key positions. And that's about $500,000. So that's about $1.4 million of cost just in compensation, just to deal with the market, right now. That $1.4 million has to be recouped. So we have to spread that out somehow across our fees to recoup it. There is no other option. There is no general fund dollars. And that's just how it goes every single year. And that's what causes those costs to increase and increase. Next slide. And what that's ended up being, and hopefully you've seen this slide before, is this is looking at our demographics for participation in some of our most popular programs. As you can see on the left, we'll start on the left side. The county population, we're a majority minority county. We're about 49.5% white, 50.5% other. And so that's the demographic, that's our benchmark, that left, the county population in a great, and the best of all possible worlds, all of our program participation would equal that same thing, because we don't want to just serve one population, regardless of what race it is. When you look at classes, you see that 60% of people who take our classes are white. The summer camps, you see that 69% of our summer camp participants are white, and that number gets smaller and smaller as you go up. Our rec center membership is almost 80% white. Golfers equals 82% white. But our Rec Pack program, which is a county general fund funded program, actually shows, and it has a sliding fee scale, and doesn't turn anybody away, turns nobody away regardless of need. That's much more, that's 28% white. On the right side, I gotta move my thing over. That's a participation by household income. So you look at and say, well, maybe it's just an income-based thing. Well, in the county population, 40% of our county population household makes over $150,000 a year. If I just go across classes, 44% of our people who participate in our classes make over $150,000 a year. 71% of participants in camps, households make over $150,000 a year. 39% of rec center memberships. So we're seeing a little bit more of a parity when we look at rec center memberships across the county population, and golfers, 52% make over $150,000. And then you look at the Rec Pack, and 15% of Rec Pack members. So what HRNA is doing is they're looking at these demographics, they're looking at the options out there. It's not, the answer isn't, and I'm just taking extremes, the answer isn't that every single thing that we do is completely 100% funded by the general fund. There is a place for a revenue fund. There is a reason to be, focus on revenue and making sure that we're making our phenomenal park system work for us, but while also making sure that we are really serving all of the residents. Everybody has equal access to the phenomenal experiences that you guys really help us provide at a lot of our sites. And so where we are right now, next slide, that's the last slide. Oh, there's a good. So where we are right now is HRNA is still working on their recommendation. We're hoping to bring that recommendation, their report to the Park Authority Board. It's a draft report at that point in time we're going to bring it to the Park Authority Board just so they could see, sort of what that first flush looks like. The next step would be taking it out for public comment and engagement and hearing from the public what it is that they would like, what is it that the public believes that should be, revenue funded or supplemented, or which costs are quite frankly too high. Then we'll bring those public comments and engagement back to the Park Authority Board to sort of create a final recommendation that we will then share and with the Board of Supervisors. So that's where we are right now. So look at those people who are very interested in this. Look for, summer, this summer, late spring, summer, when we start to, fall, late summer, fall, when we start to reach out to the public for public engagement. So. And that's it. Allison, because Allison's the boss right now, or do we want to take questions now, or what's the plan?
It's up to you. I think we do have a number of groups that send in slides that we want to make sure we get to and give people time to share. But I think there are some questions. A lot of questions have been dropped into the chat, but I think they've pretty much been answered by a variety of responders. So
I am going through and seeing, does a 2% increase apply to employees not paid by the revenue fund? Yes, the 2% increase is across the board for employees not in the revenue fund. That's automatically covered in the budget. So those were covered in the revenue fund. We cover that. The revenue fund covers that fee for all market rate increases for salary. Oh, sorry, Mike already answered. Did Mike answer that question? Okay, anybody else have any questions that aren't in the chat? And then we can move on to, feel free to just throw something out there.
Yeah, I just asked one. This is Whitney from Friends of Homes Run. And forestry is what I'm especially interested in. It's and trash. Those are my two biggies. On the question about forestry, when you mentioned that the staff was not covered, can you just reiterate, because somehow my ADHD brain did not collect what you said, if anything, about positions and roles that money would cover, that you would wish to have covered by that forestry budget?
So our original forestry budget included both contract money and staff money. We got some money, the $57,000 in talks with third quarter. I think that was what Kyle was referring to. Third quarter doesn't it's one-time fees costs. So staffing is more than one-time fees. So third quarter funding does not cover staff. So that would, whatever funding we're talking about for third quarter would only cover contract dollars.
So if you had the full amount, what would that additionally enable your folks to do? Or if we're asking for I asked for the full budget of 700 something thousand, what's my argument in terms of its benefit?
Well, if we're talking about budget cycle, then that could include staffing. If we're talking about third quarter, that would not include staffing.
And this is Tim Hackman. I think another way one could look at it, if you look at the items to be addressed by forestry, the top right quadrant would be trees, which are high risk and need to be addressed immediately. And what we're saying is, even with our budget request, it is difficult for us to address everything in that top right quadrant of high risk, immediate impact. And if you give us less than that, we have to do triage and decide which of those high risk, high impact trees we're going to be able to address. And we have to put aside other things like perhaps pest related or better growth in our forests or things of that nature that are in different quadrants. So that's one way I would look at it.
I think another point in this is that we are spending, probably this year we'll spend over $1 million over our budget in forestry and contract expenses. And as Tim said, we are only addressing high risk trees, which are trees that are a risk to human life or infrastructure. And so what that means when we overspend the forestry budget, we're taking dollars from other park maintenance operations to fund forestry. So you're seeing the lack of maintenance on playgrounds, trails, athletic fields, because we're taking maintenance dollars from those maintenance operations to be able to fund forestry. So there's a significant impact to the maintenance of all of our parks because of the overspending of forestry. One of the positions being proposed would allow us to come up with a forestry plan, which would allow for more preventative measures in terms of our management of our forest, as well as additional staff that would help with the management of trees.
Thanks. I'll take any and all information about that. And thanks.
Toddy?
Yes, thank you. I recently attended a budget town hall meeting where Christina Jackson was present, and she was answering a question or somehow speaking to the Park Authority's request for the money for trash and recycling. And she indicated that they didn't fund that because of the magnitude of the program that the Park Authority was envisioning. And she sort of suggested by implication that if the program had been smaller, there might have been some hope that maybe they could have done something. And I was just sort of curious as to whether that's a program that you all are continuing to discuss with the county executive's office, or you know, is there a way you could work with a smaller program? Or I'm just really curious as to what the response is to Christina's suggestion that they can't deal with a big program, but maybe they could deal with a smaller program.
So and we would work with anything that we have to try to advance the program. So if it's partially funded, it may allow us, as you may all know, we have 6 area maintenance shops. And what this is proposing is 2 staff per maintenance shop with the responsibility of trash and recycling. So then the staff that are currently managing trash mainly 2 to 3 days a week could focus on park maintenance. So if we received a portion of funding, we could pilot in one of the areas and then continue to grow the program as funding allows.
And this is Tim Hackman. Further to that, I think we are dealing, and it may have been mentioned before, with an overall framework that the rate of increase of, for example, residential housing assessments is not likely for the next fiscal year to be as robust as it has been for the for the fiscal year after FY24 as it is in the advertised budget. That having been said, I think the direction.
Oh.
Well, I think he froze.
Tim froze.
I'll just put a little finer point on what Sarah was saying earlier, is that
like this one
Tim,
is going to be much more difficult.
You froze for a second. You might want to go back. You're frozen for about 10 seconds.
Yeah, well, I think that's happening to all of us. So so the answer is the direction we're getting from Department of Management and Budget is, in the light of perhaps a more a less robust budget possibility in FY25. This year for FY24, Department of Management and Budget is not likely to endorse and support new programs or new opportunities such as this rather expensive trash and recycling proposal.
So I just want to put a finer point on what Sarah was saying. I mean, it's 12 people for 420 parks, and we have a zero waste ordinance, and the county is trying to go towards mandatory recycling, and having your largest landowner in the county not able to do so is problematic. We just need to figure out what the plan is. We understand that it's going to take, a strategy to get the largest landowner in the county into compliance. And Sarah was saying any way of easing into that is important, but ultimately two people per maintenance yard to pay for trash and recycling. I mean, it's 420 parks. So understanding about the pressures of the county, we just need to figure out how to get it done, because we just can't do it with current staff. I'm gonna assume, do you see anybody else's hand up, Allison?
No, I think maybe we're ready to move on. We can always, if we have time at the end, we can always field a few more questions. And of course, everybody is reachable by email and phone for further questions after the meeting as well, of course. So the next couple slides, we just have some quick updates. We wanted to make sure you all were aware we have some new staff at the sort of senior level at the Park Authority. Brian Carmen is a new division director for Golf Enterprises. Kim Eckert was recently named the new division director for Park Operations. Brendan Hannafin has been with us for about 6 months, I believe, is the division director for planning and development. Susan Kalish is started back in November as our director of marketing and communications office. And Ben Boxer is our new public information officer. So many of you worked with Judy Peterson over the many years she was with us. She has retired, and we sort of couldn't fill her shoes with just one position. So we ended up breaking her job into 2, and Susan and Ben are the new Judy, and they're working together to fill her shoes. So welcome to all of them. But if you need to reach out to any of our staff, those are some new names that you may not be aware of yet. So welcome them when you have the chance. The next slide is a quick one. Many years ago, 5+ years ago, many of you were involved in creation of our MOU template for our friends groups. When we signed most of those agreements initially, they were 5-year terms, and we've reached the 5-year mark on some of them. So we have opted to extend several of them. The agreements were written so that we can extend for another 3 years in most cases. So we're starting to go through that process. There are some things now that we've had these MOUs in place for a few years. We have some things, we want to look at the template, make sure that it's meeting our needs, make sure that it's meeting your needs. And so we may do some revisions to the template in the coming months, and we'll have more information to share about that going forward. But we wanted to celebrate that we have continuation of some of the agreements at this time. So thank you to Friends of Huntley Meadows and Friends of Lake Accotink Park and Friends of Riverbend. And now we're going to move into the phase of the evening where you all get to share your successes and stories with us and with the group. So some of you did send in slides, so we'll start with that group. I have them in just in alphabetical order, so we'll start with Friends of Accotink Creek. If she's here, Everell? Well, she had joined.
She was on earlier.
Yeah, I see her on.
We could jump forward and come back.
It's true. Yep.
Actually, I believe she's, we can't hear you. Yeah. She's trying.
No, we can't hear you. Maybe you might want to try logging out and logging back in. So we'll go to the next group, and then if we can hear you, we'll check in again, and we'll come back to you. Okay. So we will skip ahead. Next up would be Friends of Colvin Run Mill Park.
Good evening, everyone. I'm James Waller, and thank you very much for this excellent presentation. It's a lot of food for thought. But I'll give you a quick rundown of what we've been doing at Colvin Run Mill Park. Go to the next slide, please. So our major project of this last year was to renovate the family garden. This is by the side of the Miller's house. And that's been replanted and we hope that will be blossoming. The landscape architect was through there this week and said everything looks very good since it's been a wet winter. We've hosted the Celebrate Great Falls event, which was called Mingle at the Mill. It was the first adult-only event at the mill because alcoholic beverages were served. It was late at night, but we had candles up and everyone enjoyed seeing the mill for the first time or revisiting old friends there. We were very active at farmers markets and had a great time at the Reston Farmers Market where people were buying our cornmeal for their cornbread stuffing for Thanksgiving. We had 2 days of the real Santa at the mill, and our Santa was terrific. He was an international Santa with real white hair and a very long beard. His most odd request was for a reindeer from a little girl. And we have been very active doing monthly blogs about the history and technology, as well as the food that we produce at the mill, together with our quarterly newsletters. Next slide, please. We've been working very closely with Brendan Hannafin on creating a trail on the other side of this very beautiful tunnel that will connect the north side of the park where the mill is with the south side of the park, which is basically natural trails and the rail to river trails. So we're delighted that the planning for that should be starting up next month. We've also committed to purchasing additional signage around the mill. People come in and often ask at the general store, where's the mill? Because they can't see it, it's down the hill. So we'll have some signs up for both the Miller's house, which is now open to the public, as well as the mill. We'll be hosting the Mid-Atlantic chapter of the SPOOM. And for those of you that don't know what SPOOM is, well, it is the Society for the Preservation of Old Mills. And they'll be coming to Colvin Run on April 21st on a Friday morning. And also we'll be supporting the Engineering Then and Now Day, which will take place in May. We will have a reenactor, a nautical engineer, plus the former manager, Mike Henry, will dress up in period costume and pretend that he is Oliver Evans, but he has enlisted one of our board members who is an engineer to answer any technical questions. So thank you very much for your kind attention.
Great. Thank you, James. Next up, we have Eleanor C. Lawrence, Park Friends.
Hi, this is Ellen McGlone. Can you see me?
Yep.
Yep, okay, good. Let's see, I am filling in for Jen Grinnell. Quickly, we are, and I think you can just start running the slides because I haven't seen them in depth. Yeah, okay, let's sit on this one for a while. So we are working very hard to help with the equity situation, and we are dedicating some of the donations that we have been able to collect to scholarships for field trips and to camps that kids cannot get to, can't afford. We've been raising the money with our Parktoberfest. Do we have other slides, Allison?
Yes.
Yeah, okay, go on to the next one.
Mhm.
Okay, good, this is perfect, we can stay here. So in the first slide to the left, you'll see that's our Oktoberfest. We've done 2 of them now, and it's a large event that we do for the community. We were able to raise funds through that for the scholarships. And we also have used that as a way to educate people about the Woodlands Stewardship Center that's hopefully going to be opening next October, and we're all very excited about that. We also have another group in the middle. It's called an event, I should say, Parkymon, which don't tell any, I was gonna say don't tell any lawyers about this, but it's basically instead of Pokemon, it's a Parkymon thing, and people can, go and take pictures of things that they find, and then they can come back and show us that they've been all around the park, and the kids win prizes. Also, we have a new event, which is Park and Bark, that's coming up. You can see that on the right, on the top. This is going to be May 13th. That's a Saturday before Mother's Day. And Lazy Dog, the restaurant, is going to partner with us all weekend. So if you can get to Lazy Dog during that weekend, it would be great. And the final thing Jen asked me to say is that please save the date for our next Parktoberfest, which is going to be October 7th. Thank you.
There's
There we
a
go.
few more
A few more. All right.
things, and then here's the.
Right, here's the Park and Bark that's coming up.
Yay. All right, great, thank you. And next up is the Friends of Fairfax County Archaeology and Cultural Resources.
Good evening. My name is John Mullen. Unfortunately, I couldn't get my camera on because I had to switch computers because of the wind. was making the other one go out. But if you just move to the next slide, I only have one. Friends of Fairfax County Archaeology supports the archaeology and collections branch of the Fairfax County Park Authority. So we're not really assigned to any one part of the county. We promote the understanding and appreciation of Fairfax County's cultural resources through archaeology and historic preservation. And we do this by organizing archaeological symposia on diverse topics such as historic cemeteries, the archaeology of enslaved populations, transportation networks, the War of 1812, and the prehistory of the county. But we also do public outreach at Gunston Hall, Historic Huntley, Mason Net State Park, and numerous county activities such as Celebrate Fairfax. And one time we were at the Pirate Fest as well, which was quite exciting. So through our events and over the last decade or so, we've been able to contribute a few $1,000s to the FCPA Park Fund in support of the Archaeology and Collections branch. We are supporting the Collections branch, focusing on our new collections facility, which is important to us to remain accredited with the American Alliance of Museums, as this is a gold standard for archaeology and museum collections. And the county is a steward of over 10,000 historic artifacts and objects such as furniture, paintings, all of the equipment over at the Farm Museum, and over 300 million artifacts, or 3 million artifacts, I'm sorry, as well. So we would obviously like to see collections facility get funded sometime in the next bond cycle or funding. And that's it. So. And we're a fun organization, so come see us at the Eagle Fest at Mason Neck State Park is where we'll be next. Thanks.
Great. Thank you, John. Next up, we have Friends of Green Spring Gardens.
Hi, everybody. This is Mary Lou Wall. I'm representing Frogs, Friends of Green Spring. Next slide, please. The Friends of Green Springs has supported Green Spring Gardens for 30 years. We are back into schedule with fundraising and volunteer work. We have implementing the plantings of $30,000 from last year's annual appeal. And we've donated thousands and thousands of hours to the park. Over the years, we have raised over $2.6 million in 30 years. And this year we have joined the Friends group to advocate for increased park budget. Next slide, please. Our annual appeal this year, we have 1,200 members of our Frogs organization has donated money to increase the building of repairs for our historical house, and we're implementing that now. We're real excited about some of our community outreach. We've started International Story Time, where we have story time every other week in the languages of our community. Mostly that is Spanish, Korean, Amharic, and Farsi. We've also increased our presence on social media, and this has brought in a large number of new visitors to our park, and we're hoping that this will also increase our membership. Obviously, like you, our main challenge is to continue to be staffing, but we're going to invite you all to our Spring Garden Festival. We have over 2,000 people come to our festival on May 20th, so come early so you get a parking place. Thank you for the opportunity, and thanks for sharing of the staff.
Great, thank you. All right, next is the Friends of Historic Huntley.
Thank you. I'm Toddy Carnes, the president of the Friends of Historic Huntley. And first, I want to thank Jay Cole and all the park staff members who answered my question earlier. Very much appreciated. And we at the Friends of Historic Huntley work to support Historic Huntley, a federal period villa just south of Old Town Alexandria. And in working to support Historic Huntley, we determined last year that it would behoove us to work to support the greater efforts of the Fairfax County Park Authority. And so we reached out to other Friends groups and invited other groups that might be interested in working to increase the general funds budget of the Fairfax County Park Authority to join us. And Allison, if you could advance to the next slide. And together, those friends groups that joined us, and there were 8 or 9 of us, created what we are calling the Fair Parks Initiative. And that's our effort to advocate and do some lobbying on behalf of increasing the Park Authority's general funds budget. And we invite all of those of you, other friends groups who were not with us last year, to join us this year. We've just heard several presentations explaining the importance behind properly funding the Fairfax County Park Authority and the great need that exists for advocacy on their behalf. It's really shocking to see flash up on the slides, slide after slide, not funded, not funded. That is not acceptable. We need to work to get the Park Authority their fair share of the general funds budget. So please, if you want to join us, we welcome you. We really are a networking organization. We work to share ideas, to share information, and to share work product, all with the idea of bettering the Park Authority's position in general funds within Fairfax County. So if you want to join us, my email's up there on the screen. Please just send me an email. Our next meeting will be next Monday. We usually meet by Zoom Monday evenings at 5 p.m. As needed. And we'll be meeting this next Monday to talk about all the things we heard tonight about the budget, the advertised budget for Fairfax County and the Park Authority in particular. Next slide. And we invite you also to come out and see and learn and enjoy about Historic Huntley. We have our spring event, which will feature a plein air event coming up on Saturday, April 15th. And from 1 to 4 p.m., our members will be giving free tours of the site, and we'll have artists on site painting various aspects of Historic Huntley. So please come join us. We'd love to show you around Historic Huntley and introduce you to the site. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next up is the Friends of Holmes Run.
Hi all, and I too agree that it was a great presentation tonight, so informative, and I echo what Toddy has also said. Okay, so Friends of Holmes Run exists more or less to connect communities up and down the watershed, and part of those communities could be your park. So today I'm just going to make a quick, just if you mind going to the next slide, I'm going to just tell you very quickly that upcoming, we have several things that are very much in line with what you would expect from a watershed group. We have 10 cleanups in April, and that's the sweet spot between the cold of winter, when no one wants to go near the stream, and the over-vegetated May. So it's the best sweet spot for getting trash out. Now this is one reason why I care so much about the trash budget today. It's not based on appearance. It's because everything that lands in your park, on your roadside, whatever, gets swept into the storm drains, gets swept into the stream. So that becomes our problem as watershed groups, and we pull out thousands and thousands of pounds per year. So that's why I'm focusing on that. Another thing I want to mention before we advance is we're also involved in trying to add access to Holmes Run to the folks in Bailey's Crossroads, Culmore area. And this coming April, we're doing double duty because we're also doing a full slate of watershed education programming for kids, teens, and families every week, sometimes 3 times a week in the month of April. So those are some of the things that we're up to, but the one I'm going to focus on at the moment, and it's just for a minute, is tree rescues, because I think this is relevant to all groups that might be on this call. If you are, I'm going to pick on, Huntley Meadows, you are in a watershed, and your watershed might be Doe Creek, it might be Little Hunting Creek. I don't know about Doe Creek, but I know Hunting Creek is doing a ton of cleanups, and they're involved in other things. But one thing that we can also get involved in is tree rescues. Can you advance to the point of that I'm trying to make. Tree rescues are a very lonely business, and right now, I'm sure you're aware of the efforts where you can get trained to be a tree rescuer, you can go into a park if you are fully trained and approved, and do some tree rescuing on your own. But we found that it takes a lot of training in a way to kind of get to separate the root from the different kinds of vines in your mind. And so what we do is we took a watershed approach. We offer frequent opportunities for people to get additional training. And I encourage all of us as people who support a particular park to start to think watershed wide, because what we're really doing is we're creating momentum. This is showing you some of the ways we reached out just to get people's interest all up and down, connecting communities along the watershed. And if you could advance to the next slide, this is my last slide. So the idea is you get people who are more likely to come back because they start to feel like they are part of a community. You get to spend extra attention in any particular park. We've had 7 sites, and actually it's now up to 8. We're now up to about 230 volunteer hours and about 400 trees that we've saved. So you can get a whole lot more done if you start to think like a watershed, and people start to get it. They start to understand the connection in their minds between all these different sort of ribbons of parks that are the connecting tissue is maybe the stream valleys. So that's my proselytizing. But I hope you will think of your park in terms of its relationship to the overall watershed and start to form alliances. Thanks.
Great, thank you. I am going to circle back to Accotink Creek slides, and her sound is not working, but she asked if I would read out her slides. So forgive me for scrolling back this way, but it's the easiest way to get back to that part. I'm afraid I'm not going to do it justice based on what she might have added to it. It looks like they had a member of their team was given the Ellie Doyle Park Service Award. Beverly Rivera received the Park Authority Ellie Doyle Outstanding Volunteer Award for her admirable progress in invasive plant control at Lake Accotink Park. That's great. Now it doesn't want to advance. There we go. Cinderbed Road Bikeway on the wrong path. It looks like maybe they're trying to do some work to save that pathway. 2 other goals they have, enhanced non-motorized transportation and habitat preservation. This is part of an ongoing pattern of pitting one against the other, always choosing the path of least resistance that leads to paving scars of tar through our dwindling reserve of wooded habitat. And talking about the lights, course, in this case is the plan for 24-hour lighting of the path, stressing and disrupting the lives of wildlife, large and small. If you build in a floodplain, you can expect to get wet and often. The Accotink Gorge is truly one of the most biodiverse locations I have ever had the privilege of exploring. A nice quote. And I'm not going to be able to pronounce that, but it's a very beautiful flower there. And it is not too late to save this oasis, but it will be soon. Wisteria sinensis, sorry. Chinese wisteria vines are rapidly killing its canopy trees. And the last slide, citizen naturalists seek solutions to preserve this biological gem. All right, and that is the end of our presentations. Were there any other groups that would like to just come off mute and share some successes, stories that you would like to share for the betterment of the group?
I just want to do a quick plug for the Cub Run Park volunteer team. They've got a spring cleanup on March 25th, and I think this will be the third or fourth consecutive year of us having a spring fall cleanup. And just thanks again for everybody for the presentations, and really great to hear what other groups are doing. Thanks.
Excellent. Anyone else? It looks like we have a few more questions in the chat. One just came in about where does the Park Authority stand on the dredging or not of the lake?
I'll just be silent and see if somebody else like randomly wants to decide to take that. Right now, for those of you who are following along, we have the DPWES has made a staff recommendation to the Board of Supervisors. Right now, we're in support of DPWS's staff recommendation, but it's up to the Board of Supervisors to make the decision as to what the plan is. I know that there's a lot of outreach that's happening in general. And so right now, I believe that the plan is at some point in time, it'll be taken up by the environmental committee of the Board of Supervisors. And so that's when the first time that the Board of Supervisors will be discussing it as a committee of the whole. So I hope that was a phenomenal non-answer to your question. I tried very hard to make it as muddy as possible. No pun intended. I didn't even plan that. I promise you, I didn't even plan that.
Nor was my
This is Ron
triage.
Kendall, the Mason District Representative for Park Authority Board. And I personally want to thank all of you for being here and for helping us do the work that must be done. You have great organizations and you have tons of people behind you that are helping us do the work every day. And that's the kudos I'd like to offer, is because we need you out there. We love seeing you out there. And I will be trying to work out as many IM events, as many cleanup events as we can do through the spring and the fall this year. It really makes a difference when we see people out on the trails and at the facilities doing work. So thank you very much.
And Ron, thank you for reminding me that I always like to remind everybody that our board is also a volunteer group. So where we're talking about all of our friends of groups, I just want to thank our board who volunteer their time, not just every other week, but on a regular basis, and highlight the work that our board does as well. Thank you very much.
Indeed. Anyone else? Any last thoughts you would like to share? Thank you all for joining us tonight. Virtual is never quite as impactful as in-person meetings, I don't feel like, but at the same time, it does make it flexible for people to be able to join us and not have to trudge across the county. So we do appreciate you taking the time tonight and hearing all these great presentations and great information. And we enjoy hearing from you all as well about the things that you all are doing at your sites and in your programs. So thank you all for your support. If you need further contact information for anybody that you heard from tonight or anybody on staff, please reach out to me. I'm happy to share that with you or get you contact information or direct you in any way that I can. And we look forward to working with you in the future. So thank you. Have a great night and take care.
Well done, everybody. Thank you. Good night.
Good night, everyone.